So it was actually kind of interesting. I was not looking to be in cannabis PR at all. I was working in tech at a company called Zeal Media Group, which is also a PR firm, and I was pretty happy there. When the pandemic hit, it was kind of scary in terms of like job security. So I was just very happy to just have my job and just keep that. I was approached on LinkedIn by a recruiter from Mattio, and she just asked me flat out, like, have you ever thought about working in cannabis? And I really thought she was crazy. I was like, lady, what are you talking about, working in cannabis? No, like I would have never thought that. So we hopped on the call just out of curiosity, because I'm just trying to figure out like what this is really about. And she, explained how Mattio was the #1 PR firm in the country in terms of cannabis. Gave me background on the CEO, Rosie Mattio, just in terms of how she got into the industry and the different clients that she kind of has brought on board. And I told her that I would do my own research on the industry to see if this is something that I actually want to dive into. Like I said, I was very happy being in tech. I had no desire to leave it. But after doing my own research and seeing how lucrative the industry is, and just how booming it is, and how it's projected to basically kind of like dominate every other industry, I was like, I can either get into it now kind of on the ground floor, or I can wait and see what it turns out to be and then jump on board. And I thought it might be best to just jump in now on the ground floor, kind of, well, I guess before everyone wants to jump in, right? Before everyone is like, oh, I gotta get in this, I gotta get a piece of the pie, right? Let me get in now, so then I can be the one that's kind of like setting the rules in a sense, and like making my own way, before other people are like dictating like what I need to do or should do. So, and of course it didn't hurt that my parents were like, get in it so you can tell us all the stocks to invest in. So shout out to my parents, because they were a huge part as to why I said yes to the job. Yes, they do know what stocks to kind of look into now, so yes. So I think it's a little different for me in terms of being on the non-plant touching side of cannabis. I feel like, and also because I'm in PR, right? So PR is pretty much a female dominated industry, right? So I'm surrounded by mostly women in general in the PR space, regardless of whether it's cannabis, tech, travel, doesn't matter, right? I only feel or really recognize that I'm a woman when I go to particular like cannabis trade shows, right? Because when you go to those trade shows, it's not just PR people there, right? It's the people who own the dispensaries, the marketing people, it's the advertising people, like it's, all the different verticals. So that's the only time that I really feel like I am not necessarily a fish out of water, but definitely like a double minority, should I say, as a Black woman in that space. I've only been in the industry for a year and a half, so I don't think I have like that much like anecdotal kind of like info to give you. I'm still kind of figuring this space out myself, but I am happy to be in a company that is female dominated and driven. So I never kind of feel like I'm by myself or alone. But yes, when it comes to cannabis focused specific events, yes, you do stand out a little bit. But I've never felt kind of like, I guess, not heard. I've always felt very welcomed, but I am not naive to the fact that there are women in this space that have felt different than I have, right? So I do understand that there are a lot of women who are, I guess, quote unquote, deeper into the cannabis industry, and that are constantly surrounded by men, and they have to kind of speak up more for themselves, or they feel like they're being overlooked or not heard or whatnot. So I understand that aspect of it, but I personally have not experienced that. So for the most part, so cannabis is such an interesting industry, right? So when on the PR side, when you're trying to get coverage or just brand awareness, press or whatnot for your cannabis clients, the goal is always to get mainstream coverage, right? Like at the end of the day, your clients are going to prefer to be in something that's national, right? But the hard part is that a lot of national publications are still not yet open to talking about cannabis. So you have to kind of find those little pockets of, I guess, like entry points where you can do that. And so you always are trying to come up with like mainstream angles, mainstream appeals, human interest angles. So that's across the board, right? Across all cannabis clients. I would say the one campaign that I really enjoyed working on that really stood out to me was when we partnered with a man named Keith Stevenson, who is known as the first black owner of a cannabis retail shop. His dispensary is called Purple Heart and it's located in Oakland. And he was basically going through some issues in terms of his business being vandalized. It was actually pretty much destroyed by a bunch of criminals. There was like a crazy string of criminals going around vandalizing and breaking into dispensaries across Oakland. And I think the Bay Area in general. He unfortunately, succumbed to that as well. And it was pretty much my team's responsibility to make sure we got coverage for him for that. We wanted to, make sure that people knew who he was, more about his background, his story, how he got into the industry, to bring awareness to what was happening in the Bay Area with the burglaries and the vandalizing of the dispensaries that was going on. And also just kind of shine a light on someone who is black in this space, right? Because we all know that people of color don't really get the shine that they deserve. And so we made sure that we, focused a lot on the Bay Area publications and trade publications in the space. So because of the effort that we put in, we were able to get him featured in a slew of publications, including High Times, which is pretty much one of the biggest cannabis trade hubs, right?
Like before it was legal, like for a while.
It's huge, right? Like about it.
Yeah.
So we got him in High Times, we got him in Ganjapreneur, we got him in SF Weekly. So very, very proud of that campaign. And then about a year later, he was approached by the New York Times to talk about his story as well. So it was kind of like a full circle moment, like, wow, like this is cool. We were able to kind of like shine a light on him and his situation, and then someone else a year later was able to kind of pick up on that and shine more light. So it was great. I think Chicago, I want to say it's the Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong. I think it's Chicago Tribune that actually has someone who reports mainly on cannabis. I don't know if like that is his beat, but we're seeing it. We're seeing it, across like the major publications one by one, little by little. So hopefully, one day it'll be in every, publication. Yeah. So I mean, I would say like there are a lot of similarities just in terms of like who doesn't want to focus on getting mainstream coverage for their clients, whether you're cannabis or non-cannabis, right? I would say the biggest difference is that with cannabis, you have to be a little bit more strategic in terms of the angles that you come up with. Because if you just flat out, right, say like, hey, here's a new cannabis product or whatever launching, like write about our client, when you're talking to mainstream press, most of the time they're going to be like, well, we don't really talk about cannabis, and okay, that's good, but like, why is your product so different? Whereas like when you're reaching out on behalf of non-cannabis clients, it's a little easier just because, there's not a stigma attached to that non-cannabis product usually. So say for instance, if you're pushing like a camera, instant print camera, that goes across so many different demographics. It's, family friendly. There's so many different angles you can come up with there, right? If I'm pitching a pre-roll, can't really go across every demographic, right? I can't pitch that out to like Parents Magazine or the New York Times, right? So you have to be a little bit more strategic and creative, just in terms of the angles that you're coming up with, right? And human interest stories tend to get a lot more pickup. So if you can tie it to like, you know, a pre-roll that like, I don't know, helps someone with their sleep or whatever, or, you know, something that really kind of like shows a different side of why this particular cannabis product is going to help someone is helpful. Yeah, I honestly do think it really does come down to federal legalization, because right now not everyone, a lot of people are still, one, scared of the plant. They don't have the proper education about the benefits of the plant. You still have a lot of people that were taught that cannabis is just the devil's lettuce, and it's terrible, stay away from it. And so they still have a lot of those feelings and thoughts and ideas, right? So once it's federally legalized, obviously I know that there are still going to be people who hold on to those archaic thoughts about what the plant is, but I think there's going to be more acceptance of it because the country is saying this is okay now, right? So I think more people's wheels are going to turn once that happens, and I do think we'll start to see more mainstream coverage and advertisements, because obviously right now you can't really advertise cannabis. I think we'll see more of that once federal legalization happens. Well, I would hope that High Priority has changed a lot of negative views around cannabis, just in terms of the people that we have on the show. We have a lot of guests who are very entrenched in the industry and come from various backgrounds, right? And the main point of the podcast for us is to educate and highlight people of color and allies. So when you listen to the podcast, you're going to have people on there that are telling you their personal experiences using cannabis. Most of them, honestly, have grew up in a household where it was a bad thing to even talk about it, smoke it, whatever, right? And so they have to kind of unlearn a lot of the things that they were taught. So I'm hoping that when people listen to it, that kind of resonates with them as well. And then they see a pathway forward, just like that guest did, right? At some point in time, our guests, said, hey, let me do my own research, let me figure this thing out for myself, let me unlearn the things that I, was taught that was incorrect, and then let me see how I can help others, right? So hopefully that is what's happening when you listen to High Priority, because that's definitely the goal for us. So for us, people of color come first, right? So if you are a dispensary owner, if you are someone who is working in marketing or advertising or whatever your vertical may be within the cannabis space, like, we want to talk to you. So that's like number one. Two, we want to talk to people who are also allies. So not necessarily a person of color, but someone who is on the forefront of fighting for social equity, diversity and inclusion within the cannabis space. And another part of, I guess, our thinking about how we choose our guests is what's the impact so far? Because we do have a lot of people that reach out to us that want to be interviewed on the podcast, but they're very green, no pun intended. And they haven't yet been able to produce some type of impact. We want to be able to show that, right? So we want to talk about where you came from, how you got there, what that process looks like, and the impact that you made, right? So we've had to turn down guests who haven't had that last part yet. But it's always like, look, circle back with us. We do want to hear, what's been going on and like your results and all those different things. Like, come back to us. So please, for all those who we have softly turned down, we do want you to come back. Just want to see what the progress you have made is. That's it. That's all. So in terms of the media landscape, we're seeing a lot of cannabis coverage focused around CPG. So if you, are a lover of beverages in general, right?
Break down, what's CPG?
Oh, consumer packaged goods. Yeah. So we're seeing folks who have created beverages. Like I think I mentioned it earlier, Moon is a black-owned cannabis beverage. Can is a queer-owned cannabis beverage as well. We're seeing a lot more of that beverage talk. Like everyone wants to know, like what's the hottest seltzer for the summer, you know, or if you are, you know, trying to be Cali sober, right? Like what beverages can you consume that don't contain alcohol? So yeah, I think we're gonna see a lot more in the CPG space when it comes to cannabis, for sure. Yes, so for sure, influencer marketing is huge. I mean, at Mattio, my PR firm that I work at, we have an influencer arm, and they bring in a lot of clientele and proven results. Like our clients will come back and say, like, "Oh my God, yeah, we're seeing, you know, X amount of increased ROI because of said influencer campaign on this product launch," right? People are more inclined to buy things that are marketed by folks that they like, look up to, or whatnot, right? I think that word of mouth is still very powerful, even in the day of, you know, so much technology. Word of mouth is huge. If you have a friend that is a connoisseur with cannabis and they're telling you, oh, like, I really rock with this brand, you should check it out. Yeah, you're most likely probably gonna do what your friend says because they know what they're talking about, right? So that's huge. High Times, obviously huge. Benzinga, shout out to Javier. He's one of the like biggest people in the cannabis media space. Green Market Report is a huge one. MG Mag, MJ Biz Daily, Leafly, Weed Maps. These are all very important trade publications that not only I follow but also work with. So yes, shout out to all of my lovely weed writers, Dante Jordan, Deborah. You're like, come on.
We need to know these people.
Yes, like I mean, I literally like I work with these people almost every day, and I'm sure they're probably sick of me. So I'm so sorry. So the one content creator that I think everyone really needs to, if you're not on top of this guy, you need to get on it. Mecca King.
I listened to the interview.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, you're familiar. So Mecca King has this cannabis platform called Cash Color Cannabis, and he's basically trying to create like the network for all things cannabis. And I think another content creator that we all need to follow, if you don't already follow already, Jungle K. He is a huge like influencer in the space. He not only focuses on cannabis, but plants in general, which is how he's been able to kind of stay in Instagram world for a while, because as we all know, you can get flagged very easily if you're promoting cannabis, right? It's so easy to get flagged and get your Instagram account like completely taken down. But because his focus is like overall plants in general, and cannabis content just happens to be something that he focuses on, he's able to kind of like push the envelope a little bit, and he's really cool and fun. So yes, Jungle K. Definitely have to say Moon is up there. I would say outside of like products.
And can you tell us again, what does Moon do?
Oh, Moon is a cannabis infused beverage, and it's small dosage. So if you're someone who likes to microdose, if you're someone who's just, you know, just getting into cannabis and, you know, kind of want to get your feet wet, Moon is an excellent beverage to taste or try. And just in terms of like cannabis businesses in general, like I love working with Cannaclusive. It's a cannabis organization that's focused on like advocacy in the space. They push diversity, inclusion, and social equity. And I really enjoy not only working with them, but just like following them on their Instagram and seeing like all the different companies and products that they're promoting, which most of the time are like Black owned or people of color owned businesses and products. So love them. I have not been to this dispensary yet. It is on my to-do list, but we did interview the CEO and founder, Josephine and Billy's, which is located in California. So shout out to Whitney Beatty. I love like supporting that woman in any way that I can. Had her on the podcast recently too, so her episode has not come out yet, but it will. But I would love to visit her, and also another Black-owned dispensary in California called Gorilla RX is another dispensary I would love to visit. So. I would say one, definitely stay on top of the guidelines. I know it's kind of unfortunate that sometimes if you are necessarily like following the guidelines to the T, there is still a chance you might get flagged. That's the name of the game right now until this is federally legalized, right? But yes, definitely making sure your content is more education focused, not posting images or videos of people consuming, even though there are people that do that and they don't get flagged for whatever reason. You just kind of don't want to give yourself a reason to get flagged, right? And I would say look at other cannabis accounts that are still running, right? Look at those accounts that are, past like 10,000 followers and they're still running. Like, see what they're doing and maybe try to emulate that somehow, right? Obviously, like, not trying to copy and paste, but like see how they are posting their content. What type of stories are they telling, right? And I would say if you do have money, it would be smart to hire someone who is very well versed in social media content for cannabis companies. And obviously I have to do shameless plug, but check out Mattio Communications. Yes, so in terms of, I would say my immediate family, we've always been pretty open to cannabis. My parents never encouraged us to use it, but it's never been something that's been demeaned in my family. So I think my family was kind of they were caught up to speed pretty quickly. I would say in terms of maybe my friend circles, some of them are hip to the game, others not so much. Some of them are still trying to figure out if they want to try it. Some of them have tried it and had bad experiences, but it's who hasn't had a bad experience, right? Especially when you're just trying it, it's kind of like trial and error. You have to figure out what works for you, right? And then in terms of, I guess, my church circles, I feel like people want to be more progressive when it comes to cannabis. I can see the wheels turning, but I think there is still a lot of negative attitudes towards the plant, which I understand, right? If you were brought up in a religious space where the plant is being constantly demeaned or being talked about in a negative way, yes, you're gonna think about the plant in a negative way. But I think, like most things, everything goes back to education. Taking the time to do your own research and figuring out if it's good for you, right? What might be good for you may not be good for someone else, and vice versa. But I will say, with my particular church circle of friends, we're pretty open, but I'm not naive to the fact that there are a lot of people that are not in my immediate friend church circle that are not fans of it. I would say, for the most part, I am more of a flower person. However, I have been getting more into edibles just because I'm getting older and I feel like I need to kind of slow down on inhalables. Because, as we all know, inhaling things, whether it's cigarette, cigar, marijuana, is not the best for your body. So I'm getting more into edibles in my old age of 33.
What's the difference between the two highs for you?
For me, inhalables, it's more instant, right? I can take a couple of puffs and I'll feel it almost instantaneously. Edibles usually takes about 30 to 45 minutes to kick in for me, but I definitely feel the high stronger with the edibles versus smoking.
And it stays longer.
Oh yes.
See, those put me
I love it.
Those put me to sleep.
Well, see, that's really the main reason why I take edibles too. I have problems sleeping, so I usually will pop an edible with like probably an hour before I want to go to sleep, and it helps me. Living in this city, it has really like driven my insomnia to like a different level. It's just so loud in New York, so I really need it for that. I'm definitely more indica leaning, but as we all know in the cannabis industry that a lot of products are more hybrid anyway, even if they say they're more indica or sativa. But yes, if I had to choose, I would choose indica for sure. Okay, so my favorite strain is wedding cake. I love wedding cake. It's just very smooth and it gets me very, very high, which I love. So cannabis has improved my quality of life in probably the most central way, which is to help me sleep. I have had problems sleeping for years, ever since I moved to New York about 8 years ago at this point. So we all know if you don't get a proper night's rest, your day is pretty, kind of messed up after that. So I'm able to wake up feeling well rested. I can focus more on my work. I have more energy. Prior to consuming edibles, it was horrible. I never felt like I had a good night's rest. I always felt very cloudy, get very easily distracted. But now that I am like fully in like a regimen, I feel great. So it's been maybe a year now. I think it was kind of like trial and error, going back and forth between different edibles, figuring out my dosage, and now I know myself, and now I'm like, okay, if I take 5 milligrams an hour before bed, I'm good to go. So it was actually kind of interesting. I was not looking to be in cannabis PR at all. I was working in tech at a company called the Zillow Media Group, which is also a PR firm, and I was pretty happy there. When the pandemic hit, it was kind of scary in terms of like job security, so I was just very happy to just have my job and just keep that. I was approached on LinkedIn by a recruiter from Mattio, and she just asked me flat out, like, have you ever thought about working in cannabis? And I really thought she was crazy. I was like, lady, what are you talking about, working in cannabis? No, like I would have never thought that. So we hopped on a call just out of curiosity, because I'm just trying to figure out like what this is really about. And she, explained how Mattio was the #1 PR firm in the country in terms of cannabis. Gave me background on the CEO, Rosie Mattio, just in terms of how she got into the industry and the different clients that she kind of has brought on board. And I told her that I would do my own research on the industry to see if this is something that I actually want to dive into. Like I said, I was very happy being in tech. I had no desire to leave it. But after doing my own research and seeing how lucrative the industry is, and just how booming it is, and how it's projected to basically kind of like dominate every other industry, I was like, I can either get into it now kind of on the ground floor, or I can wait and see what it turns out to be and then jump on board. And I thought it might be best to just jump in now on the ground floor, kind of, well, I guess before everyone wants to jump in, right? Before everyone is like, oh, I gotta get in this, I gotta get a piece of the pie, right? Let me get in now, so then I can be the one that's kind of like setting the rules in a sense, and like making my own way, before other people are like dictating like what I need to do or should do. So, and of course it didn't hurt that my parents were like, get in it so you can tell us all the stocks to invest in. So shout out to my parents, because they were a huge part as to why I said yes to the job. Yes, they do know what stocks to kind of look into now, so yes. Yes, so I first tried weed, I think my junior year my junior year of college. And I think I was about 20, and it was not even with my friends, which is so funny. My friends still get mad at me to this day. The ones that were like, come on, try it with us. And I refused to try it with them, but I tried it with complete strangers. Yes, I know. The dumbest, please guys, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Don't try weed for the first time with strangers. It's not smart. So yes, I did it with a complete stranger. Thank God nothing bad happened, but
here to tell the story.
I'm here to tell the story. I'm alive and well. But no, it was pretty cool. I smoked a joint for the first time, and I remember fondly being full of the giggles. Uncontrollable laughs. Just, yes, I remember like it was yesterday. So I grew up knowing that my mom was a believer. I grew up knowing that she was Catholic, but my mom never pushed me and my sisters and my brother to go to church, right? So I didn't start going to church until one of my oldest sisters, her high school teacher asked her if she wanted to go to church with her. And my sister asked me if I wanted to go to church with them. And so we started going to church together with this high school teacher. So it wasn't something that like my mom or my dad was like, you need to go to church. Like, it was never like that.
You chose to do it.
I chose to do it, yeah. So
and what age were you?
I was young. I was probably 9. Yeah, probably 9 or 10 when I first started going to church. Yeah, and so, I kept going because I liked it. I thought it was cool. And I, kind of came into my faith by myself. I didn't have someone like telling me like, okay, you need to believe in this or whatnot. So yeah, my parents never pushed church, but I knew that they were religious. I knew that my mom prayed every day in the morning, in the middle of the day, and I knew that. I would see her reading her Bible, but it was never something that was pushed upon me. And so I think as someone who is a believer in Jesus, it is easy for people to kind of look at me like, you're a hypocrite. You're using weed, like, isn't that like against the Bible? And I asked them, where in the Bible? Please point it out to me, because I have not found that scripture. I don't know what book that is located in. And also, like, how do you demean something that helps millions and millions of people across the globe? That's an interesting question. In terms of my faith as it relates to cannabis, I will say that it has more so affected the people around me that partake in my faith. So I have, my other Christian friends coming to me asking me questions, right? They want to know more, like, okay, like, so what are the benefits, and like, how do I get my hands on, cannabis legally? Will I get in trouble? Like, they are more curious now, right? Before I worked in the cannabis space, I never got those questions. Now that I'm known as the cannabis friend or the weed dealer, which I'm not, everyone wants to come to me with those questions, right? I have people in the church coming up to me, approaching me like, hey, like, can you talk more about your experience in the industry? And it's crazy because my pastor too has asked me questions too. Like, he's curious. Like, he wants to know like more about the industry, more about the effects of using cannabis, and he understands that it's beyond people just sitting around getting stoned and getting high, right? I think now he's like, yeah, I get that it actually does help people on a medicinal level. Yeah, so it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh, favorite stoner movie. Oh my God. This is a good one. It's not necessarily a stoner movie, but I feel like watching this high is just kind of amazing. The Hangover, right? Like The Hangover, like watching The Hangover high is so much fun. You're just like, I'm in it. Like, I'm one of those clowns trying to piece my life together from the night before, right? It elevates everything. And it's so much, even though it's already funny, it's just being high and watching it makes it so much more funny. So yes, The Hangover. Oh, tonight. Okay. So I do have a friend who's staying with me from out of town, so I'm trying to be on my semi-best behavior. But tonight we're probably gonna have some select gummies from Curaleaf, and we're probably going to maybe partake in some shrooms. I don't know. We'll see. I'm thinking about it. Baby steps for him. You know, I'm a connoisseur at this point.
Small
of
doses.
course,
Small doses.
Small doses. We're gonna microdose.
Microdose. That's what I meant.
We're gonna microdose for tonight. Yeah. So I think that's what we'll do. Yeah. So for entrepreneurs who are really trying to get in this space, one, I would say like reach out to people that have other strengths, right? Because you can't do this alone. You cannot do this by yourself. There's no way. So if your strength is in advertising, but you need someone who has a strength in PR, in marketing, business development, reach out to those people in those spaces. It takes a tribe, right? There's no one who is gonna do all of this by themselves, create a whole company by themselves without some type of help or support. That's just not realistic. And also like utilizing LinkedIn. I think that's a very like undervalued platform at times. Like you have access to people who are in the space that have done what you are doing, have, you know, been successful in it. Like don't feel scared to reach out and send them a message. I've done that several times and I've gotten, you know, some people have responded, some people have not. But what's the saying? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So go out there, take your shot, and see what happens.